Hi, and welcome to Homo Ludens, a channel on history and board games. Today, we will look at the latest game in the Pub Battle series by Common Post Games, Gettysburg. This wargame system was introduced in 2015 and contains already 7 different battles from different eras: Napoleonic, American Revolution, and the American Civil War. The series is an introductory level wargame system, very inspired by the Kriegspiel game in its aesthetics. If you want to know more about Kriegspiel, I would recommend that you watch our Wargamology series on the basics of wargaming. I structured this review in 4 parts, and you can skip directly to each of them using the links in the description. First, a quick historical context of the Battle of Gettysburg. Then, an overview of the game components and core mechanics of the series. After that, a game review where I'll share my thoughts on this iteration of the Pub Battle system and the series in general. And finally, I'll discuss the place of this game and the Battle of Gettysburg in the overall gaming culture. Let's jump into it and talk about the history around the Battle of Gettysburg. There is a lot of good resources online to know more about this battle. I'll add some of them in the description. Here, I'll just provide a quick context so you have in mind what was at stake and the different phases of the battle. Gettysburg is one of the most important battles of the American Civil War. It is considered as a turning point, when Lee had his best chance to win a decisive victory against the North. The battle occurred in July 1863, 2 years into the war, and ended Lee's second incursion into the North. The battle spans over 3 days. The first day, the two armies enter a collision northwest of Gettysburg. The Union's Army of the Potomac and the Confederate's Army of Northern Virginia start with small skirmishes that will escalate during the whole day. Here, 3 hills are going to punctuate how everything pans out. Hare Ridge, on the northwest of the city, then McPherson Ridge, a bit closer to Gettysburg after an initial Confederate advance, and finally Seminary Ridge, on the west of the city, when the Southern troops start advancing towards Gettysburg. Those hills are decisive tactical advantages to postpone the initial Confederate push. At the end of this first day, the Union troops will have to retreat south of Gettysburg on Cemetery Hill, a strong defensive position. On the second day, both generals decided that they could concentrate their forces in Gettysburg and fight a decisive battle here. George Meade, the commanding officer general of the Potomac Army, could have decided to concentrate at Pipe Creek. Instead, he strengthened his defensive position south of Gettysburg by forming a hook around Cemetery Hill. During this second day, the Army of Northern Virginia will attack both on the left and right flank to try to surround the Union troops. On the Union's left flank, Confederates, under the commandment of Longstreet, will concentrate their offensive on the Peach Orchard, Devil's Den, and Little Round Top. Each of those attacks will ultimately be pushed back by the Union at the cost of intense fighting. On the right flank, the Confederates, under Ewell's command, will concentrate on trying to take Gulp's Hill and Cemetery Hill. Once again, the Union holds at the cost of heavy losses on both sides. At the end of this second day, the Army of the Potomac holds its position, and none of the two sides took over the other. On the third and final day, Lee decided to plan for a major offensive on Cemetery Ridge to break the Union center. Right after noon, the Army of Northern Virginia executes the largest artillery bombardment of the war to prepare this offensive. And at 3 p.m., 3 Confederate divisions under the commandment of George Pickett will charge from Seminary Ridge to Cemetery Ridge, around 1.5 kilometers in open field. This will be known as the Pickett Charge. This will prove to be a major failure and will put an end to Lee's hope to destroy the Army of the Potomac. The battle caused the largest number of casualties of any battles in the war, and Lincoln's speech in honor of the fallen soldiers, the Gettysburg Address, will give the North a huge political momentum for the second half of the Civil War. Now that we have the history covered, let's go back to the game. First, the map. As it's always the case with Pub Battle games, the map is sumptuous, taking an old map design and putting it on a sort of fabric. It's practical as it lays flat, quite fast, and resists pretty well to liquids. The texture is also quite satisfying to the touch. Looking functionally at the map, we see that, as expected, all the hot points of the battles are represented from Hare Ridge to Little Round Top. But we also see that the scope of the map is quite wide, opening the game to the exploration of some tactical alternatives. The rest of the components are also standard Pub Battle quality, wooden sticks and stickers that you have to apply before playing. The process can be quite tedious, but I feel like it has some sort of meditative value. I personally quite enjoy spending an hour sticking them while listening to music or YouTube video. But fair warning to players out there with OCD, not all the pieces are exactly the same size and it can be a bit unnerving. This game benefits from the latest version of the rules in the system, version 2.7, but the core mechanic remains the same since the beginning of the series. At its heart, Pub Battle is a simple figurine wargame articulated around a cheat pool mechanic. Counters are drawn from a bag and the player can activate units corresponding to it. It makes the game quite dynamic and leaves also the possibility to the other player to alter the order by spending commander's action. Movement is altered by the formation of the units, is it rolled column or not, the type of the unit, infantry or cavalry don't move the same way, and the terrain. Rough terrain remove 1/3 of the movement capability of the unit. It's also impacted by opposing units. You either stop 1/3 away of your movement from your opponent or you have to get in contact. After all the moves are done, the fighting phase begins. And here again it's quite straightforward. You throw dices and everything higher or equal to 4 is a success. You obviously have dice roll modifiers depending on the terrain and flanking position. Also, elite units can absorb 1 hit for free. All hits must be absorbed either by taking a step loss or retreating. In this game there are a bit less unit types than other Pub Battles games, making it easier to learn than Waterloo for example. Gettysburg proposes 3 scenarios, 1 per day, and you can play the 3 days as a campaign. It's a pretty standard proposal for a game centered around the Battle of Gettysburg, but a nice feature that makes it very manageable to play a game in under 2 hours. And now let's do the game review. Let's start by the positive. It's a very simple and nice system that I usually enjoy and that works well for this battle. Artillery is bloody in defense, especially when you're uphill, as it should be. It's an interesting situation. Gettysburg is a really amazing battle to play and well simulated in this game. The game actually lets you explore some tactical alternatives in a light and fun way. I tried actually to do a huge suicidal attack on the Union's left to try and push the system. I couldn't benefit from Sykes' mistake as it happened historically, but I felt like my offensive unraveled in a very realistic way. I could take some key position, but at the cost of so much losses that I couldn't benefit from them the day after. Now let's look at the negative sides. I tend to like the system best for lighter events or scenarios, less than 2 hours, and after that I think that the fiddliness of the system becomes annoying. Free movement has its drawbacks. It's very open and fun, but it's also very messy. Don't expect to play this game competitively, or you won't have a nice time. It's really a gentleman's game to be enjoyed around a beer with some friends. And that's the problem. At its core, Pub Battles is a beer and pretzel game. It's not supposed to be perfect, and as soon as it tries to be heavier than this, it doesn't respect the promise and is not adapted for heavier scenarios. Gettysburg is on the verge of being too long and heavy for the system in my opinion. The fact that it's split in 3 sub-scenarios does counteract that, but it's not perfect. Finally, one comment is that, as it's often the case with Pub Battle games, the map gets crowded in sensitive points, and it makes it super hard to read the terrain and have a clear view of what's happening and where actually your units are. I also have a few neutral comments. You have to like putting stickers on wooden cubes, a lot of them. You cannot play this as a rule lawyer. If you are a rule lawyer, don't buy this game, don't play this game, you will drive your opponent insane and yourself in the process. And personally, and that's purely personal, I feel a bit less involved by topics around the American Civil War. So if you're not super interested in the subject, I would advise you to pick maybe another game in the Pub Battles series, because I think that especially for those games, the subject is actually quite key to the enjoyment of the game. So overall, I would say that it's a quite nice iteration of the Pub Battle system. The fact that the battle is divided in 3 sub-scenarios is a nice touch, and the overall game is fun and light simulation of the actual historical event. I would say that if you are into the American Civil War and are interested in trying out figurine wargaming, that's a great place to start. Let's have a look at the history of games around the Battle of Gettysburg. I could probably do a whole video dedicated to the gaming culture around Gettysburg. As the most important battle of one of the most important war of the country that produces most of the war games being released, Gettysburg has been gamed to death. This is equivalent to the Battle of the Bulge, for example, or maybe even Operation Overlord. I actually did a small experiment using BGG's API, and I got stats from BoardGameGeek to analyze the trend of wargame production around the Battle of Gettysburg. For those interested in the technical part, I've added the code to get information from BGG's API and the BGG's API documentation in the description. The result is quite interesting. Since the mid-1970s, there is at least a game a year released on the subject. In the year 2000, the trend of games on Gettysburg actually follows the overall board game industry with this upward trend. And then we see that the number of games released actually reaches its peak in 2013 for the 150th anniversary. Now let's look back at the history of wargames on Gettysburg. The first modern wargame on the subject was released by Avalon Hill, a couple of years after Tactics 2. If you watch our wargamology videos, you will learn a lot more about this pivotal game. Gettysburg by Avalon Hill got multiple editions, one in 58, 61, 64, 77, and finally a 1988 edition for the 125th anniversary of the battle. With each iteration, Avalon Hill made the game evolve, streamlining the rules, improving the map, art, and counter design. It's an interesting game because its different iteration went through the evolution of the wargame industry of the time. The game started with a square grid, with a system that was a hybrid between free movement figurine games and modern wargame with a grid approach. It switched from a square grid to a hexagon grid in 77, and the 88 version had some great improvements to tactical depth, making it a way more complex game than what it was at the beginning. Gettysburg has also been a battle used to try different approaches to wargaming, trying to make the genre evolve and sometimes get closer to the evolution of the rest of the industry, switching to Eurogames. You have Martin Wallace's Gettysburg, that is an excellent example of that, hiding a pretty deep tactical wargame behind wooden meeples and Eurogame aesthetics. But there is also Guns of Gettysburg by Rachel Simmons, trying out radical new mechanics to wargaming, also using wooden sticks, much like pub battles, but with an innovative approach to area movement. Personally, my first experiences with Gettysburg wasn't on tabletop, but on PC. The first game I played was Sid Meier's Gettysburg in 1997. Back then I didn't find it as exciting as Warcraft 2, for example, or other Sid Meier's games like Civilization. Yet, it was an amazing real-time wargaming experience that left its mark on my imagination. But one game got me really excited about this battle, and it was Ultimate General Gettysburg. For the last 5 years I've almost stopped completely playing video games, but the Ultimate General series is still very dear to my heart. It does what in my mind digital wargames should do, provide great readability of the action, give the player interesting and understandable decisions to make, and a blend of tactical and strategic decisions. But if you are into tabletop wargaming and are a beginner wargamer and you would like to try a game on the Battle of Gettysburg, you have two really good options to get into it. The first one is Gettysburg 150. It was also the first tabletop wargame I played on the subject. It uses the hold the line system, very simple, quite fast, but still packs a lot of interesting decisions. This game is almost abstract and still manages to provide a decent simulation of the event. Then the second option has been published in the last issue of C3I. Mark Herman released a small game on Gettysburg. I haven't tried it yet, but it looks like an excellent small game on the subject and the reviews are pretty good. In conclusion, I would say that Pub Battles Gettysburg is a good game in the Pub Battle series, and if you wanted to try the system, it's a great way to do so. It's a bit meatier than the first games, but it's cut out in smaller scenarios and the battle is interesting and rendered well by the system. Pub Battles is also a good way to get introduced to classical wargaming with free movement, old school maps and nice wooden pieces. Personally, I think that it is a system that has its limits, but I enjoy playing it and have a soft spot for the aesthetics. I'm currently playtesting a future game in the system, the Battle of Austerlitz. If you're more interested in the Napoleonic era as I am, I would strongly recommend that you wait for the upcoming Kickstarter campaign. The situation is super interesting and the game is a blast to play, but I might be biased. I hope that you liked this review. If you did, please consider liking and sharing the video. If you have any feedbacks or requests for future videos, feel free to let me know in the comments. This was Homo Ludens, thank you for watching and see you next time.